Hi, good morning, and welcome to PV 31 and the 21. This is Denise Harris-Yitzi, and I just want to say thank you so much for joining me. Today is going to be called Saturday Morning Coffee. I'm going to try to do this pretty much every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. But today's topic is actually called Driven or Directed. If you're not familiar with PV 31 and the 21, I want you to know that this site is here for you. God has really challenged me to allow myself to impart into women all across the world with 5 E's to enlighten, educate, equip, empower, and employ you into all that God wants you to be as a woman in the 21st century. PV 31 and the 21, a Proverbs 31 woman in the 21st century. So thank you for joining me today. So today's topic is called Driven or Directed, Living by a Spiritual GPS. What do I mean by that? Well, I don't know about you, but in this day and age, there's a lot of opportunity to use a GPS. You're going on a vacation, you're going somewhere that's unfamiliar, and so we pull up this little thing called a GPS. Well, I want to bring it to you from a different perspective today, like God's positioning system. What do I mean by that? Well, you know, internally, there's a desire for God to direct each one of our lives. As we yield to Him and we say, okay, here is what I have, He literally will guide and direct your steps. It says that He will guide and direct your steps and make them sure. And so, you know, let's think about a GPS. A GPS allows us to have that direction from here to there. It gives, but you have to know the destination. So you put in the destination and it populates the direction. It populates that map. And then you have to trust what it's telling you. I don't know about you, but sometimes I really struggle with that concept of believing what that voice is telling me. So you have to trust the directions that it's giving you. And then the last thing is you have to follow it all the way to the end. You can't just get on the path and get halfway through the trip and go, oh, I'm not sure about this. It's not going to work. It's not working. I feel like you're taking me off course. And so with that, I did just feel like that was such a great analogy to use so that you can be thinking about that. We're actually going to reference it through the message and through the lesson. So there's a couple scriptures that we're really going to kind of focus on today. The first one is Mark 6:46, and I want to share this story with you because it's very important for us to recognize that in this verse, what it says is that Jesus got up early in the morning, and when He woke up, He went away to pray and get God's voice for the day, get that internal compass, get the GPS, the direction for the day. Well, what it said is that Peter and his friends came and found Jesus and said, what are you doing? Everybody's looking for you in the city that we've been in. And He says, you know what? It's time to leave that city and go visit another city. And so that is really a unique concept, to think that Jesus Himself had to separate Himself daily to get God's voice. You know, that is a critical point for us, because we're saying if Jesus, who is the Son of God, needed that kind of direction, that kind of daily set aside to really hear God's voice and get the plan for the day, how much more we? And yet those other voices come in and try to challenge us. Hey, this is what the people are saying. This is what our inner circle is saying. And yet Jesus said, no, for this purpose I have come. It's time for me to go do this. And so I thought that that was really powerful. The next verse that we're going to visit and actually just kind of refer to is in 1 Kings. And it actually talks about where Elisha had gone through a huge, you know, he had obeyed God, he'd done all the right things, and when he did, it caused some flack in his life. And so it said that he literally ran away to a cave. And when he got there, he hid. And literally, it said that there was, outside the cave, all of a sudden, there was this huge earthquake. And then there was this huge fire. And then there was this huge tornado. And then it said there was a still small voice. And the still small voice said, what are you doing here, Elijah? And he rehearsed to God why he was there. And from that place, that quiet place, that cave place, God gave him the directions. He gave him the GPS for the next steps. Okay, you need to come off this mountain, and then I need you to go do this, this, and this. And so that's what I'm expecting to happen to you today. So as women of God, how does this apply to us? How do we go from being driven or directed? Well, I really was thinking about what are some things that I've heard as I sit down with women all across, you know, my circle of influence and even in my own life. And it's like, okay, what are some things that make us feel driven? Well, the first point is this. We don't get directions. You know, we don't use that GPS. We don't rely on that resource that we have that will allow us to know where we're going, to have the map. I don't know about you, but sometimes, especially when I feel like I'm going somewhere familiar, I will, and this probably frustrates my husband, but I'll say, no, I know the way. Like, I got this. I don't need to punch it in. And so many times, sometimes for us, we don't even consider, like Jesus did, to go and set ourselves aside, to think, hey God, do you have a plan outside of mine? So that's the first point, is we don't even consider that God might have an opinion, that God's positioning system wants to articulate the destination that he's trying to get us to. And I thought that was one that wasn't even my notes, and before it went live, I thought that's a big one. That's a big one. It's been a big one in my own life. The second thing I wrote is that we get caught in the trap because we're qualified, and this is what I mean. Just because you can doesn't mean you're supposed to. So many times people will put their expectation on us because they'll be like, oh, Denise knows how to do this, or you're so good at this, or you should. And that's really important. I just want to say that to you as a truth. I pray that liberates you. Just because you can do something does not mean that you're supposed to be doing it. So it's important that we take the chance to evaluate the things that are on our plate and in our life, to say, should I really be doing that? As we take that time of self-evaluation, it really does allow you to see the thermometer in your life. A thermometer tells you the temperature that you're really at. And so emotionally, it allows us to take our temperature. Emotionally and spiritually, it allows us to kind of have that gauge. And so a great thermometer is this: you will be able to endure any circumstance. God will give you the grace, the mercy, the strength, everything that you need. There are some difficult circumstances in my life that I have had to walk through, but I had the grace to walk through them. A great thermometer is this: if something that you're carrying is too heavy, you're probably not supposed to be carrying it. And that could be just that you picked it up because you could, but it doesn't mean that you were supposed to. Just because you're able, again, doesn't mean that it's something that's supposed to be on your plate. It's supposed to be in your circle of responsibility. So that's the awesome thing about like what Jesus did, separating ourselves to that time daily. You look in the Old Testament and it talks about how the children of Israel, God allowed them to be put in a position where every day they had to go out and get manna. Manna was like bread from heaven. But he said, I don't want you to pick up tomorrow's. The only day you pick up tomorrow's is on the day before the Sabbath, because they weren't allowed to do it on the Sabbath. And if they did pick up tomorrow's manna today, it literally said by the end of the day, it rotted. It got wormy. And what is the point of that story? It's going because, you think about when Jesus' disciples came to him and they said, teach us how to pray. And he said, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. But it goes into saying, give us this day our daily bread. That was exactly what manna was, the daily bread. And so, it's important that you recognize that the things that you did yesterday may not be the things that you need to be doing today. Just because we get programmed into a lifestyle, again, we get on that road, and I don't know about you, but there's times you don't even have to think about the directions. You get to work and you think, how did I get here? Because your brain was on a million other things. And that's the thing, is God, give us this day our daily bread, because the direction might change today from where it was yesterday. Just like that manna, he wants to give you fresh manna, fresh revelation, fresh directions. God knows what's ahead. The cool thing about a GPS is when you are looking at it, a lot of times what it will do is redirect you around bad traffic, and in that, God knows what's ahead for you. So as we get that sensitivity daily, as we take that time to set ourselves aside and go, God, what would you have to say to me today? Give us this day our daily bread, and allow him to redirect us around those construction zones in our lives, around those things that would hinder us or hold us up in our progress. And so that's the first thing, is just because you can doesn't mean that you're supposed to be. The third thing was this: we allow others to manage or set our agendas. And why do we do that? Well, the truth is, a lot of times why that happens is because we don't have a plan. We haven't taken the time to really create a specific agenda. We kind of are just going by the next urgency, the next emergency, the next, kid schedule, the next husband schedule, the next dinner, the next time we're entertaining or going to church or whatever it is, the next thing on the calendar. And that really is something that's important for us, is as we fail to plan to go, okay, stop, let's take the time and actually map it. Why am I doing the things that I'm doing? I'm doing them with intentionality. Not that any of those things change. It just doesn't feel like it's directing you. It feels like you're directing it. Driven is almost like something's behind you, pushing you. You don't feel like you have control. And that's why I loved, the imagery that I gave when I advertised for this actual live feed is this. It's going, it's almost like being the captain of a boat and you have your hand on the wheel, so there's this sense of control, and yet you have no rudder, and so the wind and the waves are just blowing you everywhere, and yet you have your hands on the wheel, but you feel like you have no control. And so that is, the point that carries in here is when we don't have a plan, it allows others to set that course for us. And it is critical that we know what God's plan is for us, so that it says that He guides and directs our steps. He makes them sure. And so with that, I would say, the cool thing about a GPS is that you have to enter the destination to get where you're going. And so you got to know the destination for your life. If you don't know, separate yourself to God. Just like I talked about with the prophet Elisha, get to that quiet place. He will guide and direct you. He will give you the plan. He may not give you the whole plan. I think that's sometimes where we get frustrated because we want to be in control and we want to know, but He will give you the next step. He'll give you the next step, and that's really all you need to get to the places beyond that. So you have to allow that destination to be entered. And then the other thing that was, I really like this one, is we allow others to manage our course, so they're setting the destination. Or this, like we have a backseat driver. I don't know about you, but I tend to help my husband when he's driving. He is very good about relying on the GPS. He is very good about wanting to listen to that intently. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know why she's taking us this way. Like, it's so much easier to go over here or go over here. And so that's, again, the third thing. Other people want to guide and direct us, whether they want to set the destination for us or they kind of want to help us on the way, to redirect. And it's just going, shh, it's, the unique thing about a GPS, and if you've ever had to use one, there's a process that happens. We have to really get centered. Like when I do, and I'm getting much better with the GPS. If I use the GPS, I'm not listening to the radio. I'm turning it down. I'm not letting people in the car be loud, especially when you're coming up to those key intersections and it's like, shh, I need to hear this. When we get that kind of urgency inside of us to really be directed, to really allow the leadership of the Holy Spirit in our life, to really recognize God has a plan and He knows all those steps along the way, then you really will quiet yourself. You will turn off all the noise and you will just cause yourself to really focus on that still small voice. And so that's a real key thing to think about. And when you're doing that, you're not allowing other people to direct you. What's another reason that we feel directed? This is the fourth one. It says we allow guilt, whether real or perceived, to drive us. And I'll give you an example. So real is, you may have people in your life that are manipulative. They will tell you you don't love them. Oh, I didn't realize that you didn't care about this as much as I thought you did, or as much as I do. That's a real thing where people are trying to put guilt on us to cause us to make a decision that aligns with their priority, their destination, their direction. And yet, that might not be what God has for you. And I'm not saying that it isn't, but don't let the reason that you put your hand to it be because of them. Because if you do, the truth is, a lot of times what will happen in those situations and in those relationships is that we will say yes initially. We'll buy in. We'll go, okay, I'm going to do it. And in that, what happens is that we end up having we end up getting resentful. That's the truth of it. We end up getting frustrated. We end up getting resentful. It ends up impacting our relationships negatively anyway, just because we have not taken that time to really hear what God says and do it. There's a difference. This is really, really, really important. If you're doing something because somebody asked you to and it's out of duty, and the contrary would be out of desire, it makes a huge difference. Duty is like you have to. You're doing it for them. You're doing it. And I'm not even saying it's not the same action. There are things that initially I really did hear what was said to me and then said, does that align with my destination, my priority, where I know God is taking me? And if it did, then I did align my time, my activities, my choices along with that. And it's different when it's your desire, not your duty, not because you have to, not because they said. Now, so the first part was real, that people are putting those expectations on us and making us feel guilty. The second thing is that we have this perceived guilt. We have this idea of this heaviness that's coming on us, like, oh, this is what they'll think, or this is what we'll do. And what do I mean by that? I had a friend who is fabulous. I'm going to turn on my battery. I have a friend who is awesome. She's an awesome mom. She's an awesome wife. She's a ministry head, and yet she really felt guilty about taking some time for herself, about separating herself to get quiet and hear God. And she was like, yeah, but if the kids interrupt or things happen, and it's going, listen, you can't give what you don't have. Like, that is really important for you to know. So I'm not saying that there is an opportunity where things are going to come into your life, but perceived is going, don't think through that filter. Think of it like this. When you're built up, you have it to give them. I'm going to share my own testimony with you with this. So my husband and I merged the Brady Bunch. When we got married, I had 2 boys and he had 3 girls, and now we have one beautiful family with 5 children. But when we first moved into the house, it was small, and so my husband was very intentional to create this quiet time space for me in our bedroom. Now, what is important for you to recognize about me is that in our house there was open door policy. All of our children knew that if my bedroom door was open and I was in there, they could come in and talk to me. There was this sitting area. But if I closed the door, I was either changing or I was getting built up. I was taking that time to set aside to journal, to get quiet, to hear God's voice. Because the truth is, if I did not have that time, I wasn't equipped. I wasn't able. Not that I couldn't. It was just that I was trying to give out of them from a depleted state. You can't give what you don't have. And so they knew that when that door was closed, give mom 5 minutes, give mom 10 minutes, because when she comes out, she'll be better. I'll be able to hear more clearly. I'll be able to focus. I'll be able to probably give you better advice. And so that is really important for you to recognize. You do not need to feel guilty. You need to take that time, and you need to make sure that that is happening so that you have what you need to give to your kids, give to your spouse, give to your coworkers and your parents. And so it says, a word of advice: if you're doing something out of duty, I mentioned that, not desire, then it's time to reevaluate. And so let me look at this. Okay, so the last point that I have before I go into just some keys to focus on is if you're allowing your past to dictate your present. That's the last thing that I really thought of when I talked about driven versus directed. And what do I mean by that? It's going, we've allowed the failures of our past, or I've done that before, or I've tried and it didn't work, and it hasn't worked consistently. The unique thing about a GPS is if you miss your turn, if you've gone past that route, or you weren't really paying attention and you kind of got off course. And that's what Ron and I did. We were driving the other day, and we both thought, I know the way, and so we turned it off for a minute, and then we turned it back on just to make sure we were on the right course, and we had gotten off course. And as soon as we turned it back on, the voice inside the GPS said, recalculating route, redirecting. Well, I want you to know that no matter what failure or falter you feel like you've gone through, like, God is all about recalculating. The destination hasn't changed. Don't think that just because you haven't made it today, you haven't made it maybe in the time frame that you thought, it doesn't mean that you're not going to the same place. It doesn't mean that He's still not going to direct you there. It just means that there might need to be some recalculation. And so with that, allow Him to do that in your life. Stop allowing, the driven part of that is that when you feel like you failed and there's this hope inside you, something's still pushing you towards that thing, that's the conflict that it creates, to say, well, I should be doing this, but I'm not going to because I failed and I tried it and I did it. And so in that, it's going, whatever that thing is, just return again, get built back up, and allow God to do what He needs to do in your life to make those things happen. Okay? And so what I do want to take, these are your takeaways. It is critical to set time aside to get that destination. If you don't know, God will tell you. If you seek God, He is going to lead, guide, and direct you into the things that you need. Remember, if Jesus had to do it, and He did, then how much more we. The second thing is it's important that we allow ourselves to get God's focus, get God's direction. A lot of times we get stuck in the trees. You know, I love the story of Sam Walton. It says that literally he would get in a plane, and how he built the Walmart empire is that he would get in a plane so that he was above the trees, and in the midst of all the trees from the plane, he could see that there was little towns and little communities, and he would say, okay, that's where I'm going to put a store. That's where the need is. You know, when the Bible says when we wait on the Lord, He will renew our strength. We will mount up with wings of eagles. And so as we do that, it lifts us above those circumstances, the driven, those things that we talked about, whether it's expectations, whether it's disappointments, whether it's not getting direction and taking the time to get direction. But in all of those things, it's time to wait on the Lord. You know, I would encourage you, take these verses that I've given to you today. In Joshua 1:8, it says, meditate on the word day and night. And as you do and observe all that's in it, as we hear it and then we obey it, it says, then you will make your way prosperous and of good success. What does that mean for us today? It means then you're going to get to your destination. It's so much easier when you're listening to that still small voice, when you're following the daily guidance, getting that manna, getting that daily bread, and know that God is going to speak to you. He's leading, guiding, and directing you into all truth. I just want to say thank you so much for joining me. I pray that this blessed you today on FaceTime Live, Driven versus Directed. I'm going to put out a challenge to you. I need your help. Part of our mission, and I say it almost at the end of every video, is that you are helping me reach across the table and all around the world, one like and one share at a time. This video will publish as soon as it's over. It will actually be recorded and posted on Facebook. I'm asking you, if it blesses you, share it. Share it with me. We're at like 380 likes on PV31 the 21. I would love to get to 400 by the end of the weekend, and the only way I can do that is with you. You know, you think about when Peter saw Jesus. It says that Andrew saw Jesus. He went and found his brother Peter and said, come see, I found the Messiah. It's that invitation. It's that reaching into your circle of influence to share the truths that you're finding, the things that are helping you and liberating you with others, that are helping us reach across the table and around the world, one like and one share at a time. Thank you so much. God bless, and I can't wait to see you next time.